Welcome back there, audience. Hope you're doing good. Just mixing my tea. It's quite warm outside, but it's perfect with the fan. Mm. Cheers. Oh la la. Nice one. Well, we're going to talk about something very, very interesting today, as always. But this one is a biggie. And the talk is going to be about willpower. But we're going to look at it from different angles. To start with, I want to say something about the two types of energies that we can. There are two types of energies. One second. Okay, we're back. So, there are two types of energies. I mean, you could categorize in many more, but for this particular example, I'm splitting them, the infinite and the temporal, the light and the fire, intelligence and will. Okay? Then will may be split into two, the blue fire, the red fire. The blue fire is water fire, and the red fire is earth fire. It's still will, but one runs imagination. Imagine that imagination is run by will. Um, Same thing in the physical world. I call that energy mana, blue, vital, red, just like in the video games. And that is a type of energy that drives you to the completion of your task, to the completion of your imagination, or the completion of the physical reality, whatever task needs to be completed. Okay. Now, without this, it doesn't matter how awesome the intelligence you have, nothing's gonna get done. You see, that is the problem with these people who discover the intelligence and say, "Oh, I retired from life. I don't have to do anything anymore." See, that's my problem with them. And because when a society, when human beings only know will as a means to an end, then it is going to use that to um, compensate for the lack of intelligence. And they may even create something called artificial intelligence. You know what I'm saying? So, you see, it is this energy, this drive, this will that does that. And whenever the will is trying to compensate for the lack of intelligence, that's when the problem starts happening. Okay? Will in itself is not bad. It is bad if it is not run by the intelligence. Okay? And as you can see in this world, mostly it is not run by the intelligence. The will is not wielded by the intelligence. That's a big problem because it's just the will trying to wield itself, and it creates all sorts of problems. So this is a corrupt will. And so this is why you see, like, in people, like they going, they doing, because will is in action, right? It makes people do things. Pleasure, reward, pain, punishment, right? That's the name of the game. And so everybody's just running and running and running and running and running and running, not questioning whether this leads to anywhere good, right? So that's a type of blind will and a type of corrupt will. Okay? Now, you can call this will demonic. It becomes demonic if it is not run by the intelligence, but it's an energy. It's an energy still stuck somewhere, right? So when you encounter some environment, people who run on that energy, you're going to encounter that corrupt energy, that corrupt fire, corrupt will energy, and you're going to feel it. And you're going to have to take them back to hell, to the Mount Doom, to the source of the fire, where that will can be corrected. Okay? Because will becomes demonic or satanic or Luciferian when it's not run by the intelligence. And it's inevitably going to be so if there's no intelligence. Okay? So, this is why, like, people like Krishnamurti were always talking about forget the will. Forget the will, and you cannot will this into existence. Because he would ask the question to people like, well, how do I connect to this energy, this thing, right? And so everybody's still in the mind, and they think, how do I get this? Because, okay, you want to get this because all along up to this point in time, you've been getting everything through will. Now, there's something that you cannot get through will. But immediately the mind comes up and says, like, well, how do I get this? And it says, no, you cannot get this. So how the fuck? Well, if you can't get this, what do I do? Well, that is when it leads a person to stop the will that is keep on searching and seeking, and fall through into something that is an intelligence that is not based on will. And then when it does that, all of that energy of will is being taken, which was misused, and remolded back. And so this is why, like, I like the gamma rays and, you know, the neutron star. If you really look at it, it seems like there's a little crystal in the center and it's beaming these gamma rays at the top and the bottom. The top being the astral, the mind, the bottom being the earth, the physical, the imagination, and action. Okay? So that is the corrected will. And it's often symbolized by the sword, you know, the Excalibur sword, the specter, the wand, right? If the bottom stick is usually symbolized with the sword, the upper sticks usually symbolized with the wand, the magician and the warrior, right? Now in the center, there's a philosopher's stone, right? The crystal, the crown, the ring, the bejeweled crown, right? So this is all the symbolism of function of consciousness. Now, only when the will is corrected can it end up doing something that is of benefit of the whole. Not that type of whole. Get your mind out of the gutter. But it's impossible to escape, because everything in life is one big bang, right? Okay, so now we're correcting the will. However, after the alchemy is done, the will that has been corrected, it means that now you're going to have the idea, you're going to want to create something that is correct. But to do so, you will still need energy to get this done. Now, it is limited amount of energy in astral, in the physical, in total. You can call it collective. Okay? Now, if the people are using up that energy for like some malicious will, you're gonna have to take that will, bring it back to the source and recycle it, and to imagine something different that is that's being imagined, and of course take action on something that is different, that is uh, has been taken action so far on, right? So that brings me to this philosopher's stone. We keep on talking about calibrating consciousness. That's great. It's the alchemy and theurgy. That's the nucleus. This is where all the films of creation. But then the light shines through that film of creation, that hologram, and that is the will now. And shining the image on the screen. And that is cannot be done by itself. It is not be done through being. It is only done through doing. It is done through you throwing the hat over the fence and saying this will be done. You understand the attitude that it takes? And if you say this will be done, then to burn through until that is real, there's going to be a certain type of challenge given to you. I should say may, not necessarily, but it may. You may even feel it. Okay, well, you're trying to imagine something and there's some heaviness within your chest. It's like, okay, you want that thing. We're imagining that thing, or you want to do this thing. Why is there this heaviness? Why is there this block? This block is there is because of all the misused fire energy, misused will energy in the reality that you're in. It's because it's been used, and so you have to take it. You have to take that energy, alchemize it into the correct fire, and then shoot your will. Take your shot. Okay? This is very, very important, because I've been speaking with a few people about this. And this question always arises, like, why there is this lack of will. For people who run on intelligence, why is there a lack of will? Well, the answer is that you gotta fucking take it back. You gotta take the fire. You gotta take the fire back. That's the answer. And so that means that your coherence in the heart, that's just the beginning. Now you're gonna have to, will it into existence with your mind and body. That brings me to thaumaturgy, and I've not talked about this a lot. Mostly I just try to explain this alchemy and theurgy, which is obviously this amazing thing that you're capable of transmuting the energy and creating beautiful states of consciousness. That's great, and that's the world of angels, if you will. But now we're going to the world of demons. And if you will, if you leave the angels where they're supposed to be, if the angels run the demons, everything is fine, right? And I don't want to confuse this word demon with, something evil. I'm using this word demon to describe a specific drive or will to accomplish the task. It's a program which has been imbued with the fire, which is energy, to complete the task. Right? So if you program the robot to do a specific task and you give it enough energy as a fuel, and that's just one task to complete, and the program is running, so the energy is being used to accomplish this task. Now, will the robot stop? The robot will stop only if you physically prevent it with another force of will or runs out of energy. That's when it's going to stop, because the program has been already set. So to the robot, the release is completion of the task. Until that is completed, the energy is being used until there is a completion, and then there's a release from action. Right? So the use of energy has been set on one particular task, and there the drive to do this. This exact same thing what happens within your brain. We're not different. You program the brain to accomplish the task, and then you're gonna have this energy and drive to complete it, and it's gonna feel like a backflow of energy until you complete it. That's where the drive is coming from. The hat has been thrown over the fence. The program has been set. So these programs you can call demons. Now, when these programs are running wild and trying to replace the intelligence, then becomes evil. But they're not intrinsically evil. The program to complete the will and complete the task is not evil, of course, right? Like you can see that it is not. But that's what the demon actually is. If you really look at this from clear and what you call it, logical perspective. I mean, you may use another word, but the angels and demons, and they do have this particular meaning that what I'm talking about. But if you don't like it, you can use something else: the intelligence and will. Okay. Point I'm making is that the intelligence cannot, replace the will, and the will cannot replace the intelligence. Those are two different ways of being and doing. There's two different ways. One does not require you to drive and to seek, because there is the spontaneous unfoldment. It requires you to be present and having your attention, right, being used. I say being used because it's almost like you're not really doing anything, right? It is being done to you because you have created the best possible conditions for the intelligence to arise. So it becomes this, from the being to doing. That's why theurgy is when the being and doing begins. But it's still not that will driven. There is doing going on, but there's no doer, right? That's the world of theurgy, and this is why it's so intuitively driven, and it cannot be forced by will, because it's different energy. Okay, so there you go. So that's the Chewy Nugget Center. Ghost, right? Angels, intelligence. Machine, demon, intellect, willpower. The vertical dimension and the horizontal dimension of consciousness. Okay? They both must be used in concert. So, if that's what the demon means, and it's basically set for the completion of one specific task, and until it's done, there's no release, then that's what the purpose of a demon is. So, what I'm trying to say here is that, is it why they always kind of depict it more like red, right? Demons. Fire, right? So, and there is will driven. Guys, like, this is what I'm trying to say, is that imagination is will driven, action is will driven, and that will may be opposed, because there's a lot of unintelligent energies are trying to create something different in this world than what intelligent energies are trying to create. So there's a type of war for the astral reality. What dominates? What kind of will dominates in astral reality? It is a type of war. It's happening collectively on a massive scale. It is not subjective just to one person. Now, a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people, they already see that, okay, this is imminent. Basically, they see we already passed the threshold where this reality would have ended up in a really bad situation. We have already passed the threshold and we're not going to end up in a bad situation. But at the same time, we did not end up in the reality where that's going to be sort of like, um, instant golden age and whatever. So we ended up somewhere in the middle, which means this work that still needs to be done. I don't know if you had this feeling. I also had this. I mean, I don't know if you had this feeling, but I had this feeling where it felt like everything's just going to be over. Um, there's some massive changes going to take place. I mean, like, economically, everything, and everybody's just going to understand the way to live here and just start living this way. And there was this little boom where there's a lot of people who say like, hey, yeah, we got to live sustainably. Let's do it. Like, let's let's do it. And there was this flash, but it did not take enough momentum, and did not was it was not taken by the people who are stuck in the matrix, and they did not see that instead of chasing the money, they chase sustainability, right? And so there was a kind of a flash, but it did not pick up the speed. Now, because it didn't happen, it's going to take uh, quite some time until the next run is going to be born. So that's basically the feeling, is that like we tried the best, it was not enough intelligence for that reality to appear, for that timeline to start happening. So we're not going back to this, 1984 or whatever, that horrific timeline, that is for sure. But we did not end up in this holistic timeline yet. It's delayed, right? This is why people are trying to predict the future, but the future does not work like that. The future, if you noticed, but in the word future, there's a word dick. Dictate. Nobody predicts the future as if it's coming, right? When you say you predict the future, you're the one who's putting the energy of will for that to be the case. Okay? It's not like the future is set. The very prediction is calling that reality to be in existence, right? So when somebody says to you like, oh, I've seen the future, this is what I see. No, they just saw one version of that future, and they are putting their energy, because they're saying that that's what's going to be. So they saw it, right? So they must be true. And so they're saying that that's what's going to be. So no, they're saying, what they're doing is like, I am putting my energy behind this possibility, behind this timeline, right? I'm using my will for this timeline to exist. And then I'm saying to other people who don't understand how reality works, it's like, oh, that person sees the future because we're right about a couple of times, so they must be seeing the future. Well, self-fulfilling prophecy, all prophecy is self-fulfilling. You understand? So if you convince enough people that that's the future, that's the case, that's the timeline that is going to be selected. So you got to be very wary of the people who predict the future. You see, because what they say is I'm voting for the future to be like that. That's what they're really saying. So because I'm voting something else, I'm saying no, I predict different. I'm putting my energy on a different thing. It's just like, and and the most energy when it goes to this threshold, and when it crosses this threshold, and when there's a specific amount of energy, because like I said, the energy is limited over here. It can only go this timeline or that timeline. It has to solidify, and where that energy is going to go, We all, with our will, with our imagination, with our intentions, are setting the course, right? And if there are a lot of people are gullible, it's like, oh my God, the world is gonna. So that's what they're contributing. But thank God that other people that function on intelligence and they can outvote the people who are contributing to disaster because they're afraid for the disaster to happen, right? So, million people who live in fear can be outvoted with one alchemist by by him choosing another reality. But it's not easy because, like I said, it feels like you're in hell because you are intending one reality to be different the way everybody's trying to create, or a lot of people trying to create. So you get all of this work to alchemize that cor- corrupt fire, corrupt will to regurgitate and to create something that is of the vision that you envision. Does that make sense? That's how reality works. And so collectively, people are voting what kind of reality is going to be. So if some schmuck comes along and says like, "Hey, I predicted this is what's going to happen in 2027," and everybody believes this, then that's what's going to happen. But if few people don't and say, "I don't vote for this," and if they have enough capacity to alchemize those energies, then thing is not going to happen, right? So these prophets, they're wrong all the time. You see, because you because but these they were quote unquote wrong are abandoned, and the ones who were quote unquote right are now prophets. But they didn't predict shit, man, at all. So you see, in the word predict, there's a word dick. The dick is basically symbolizes the sword, the wand, the will. That's what it symbolizes. It's what's going to happen. What kind of reality is going to be willed into existence. And you have this reality that people in the matrix trying to do this, right? And they believe that like, oh, this is what's going to happen, and um, you have to understand, like, if people believe that everybody's getting cloned, right? And other people believe like everybody's getting drugged. Uh, that's why they change, And so people are subscribing to this reality, that reality. Are they being cloned? Are they being drugged? Are there, the controllers there of, what's really going on? It's going on. It's gonna be something to be the case as what is most to be believed, right? That's what's going to happen. But of course, there's a fact. There is an actual um, fact, but in the sense that there is a correct reality. There is a correct reality, and now that everything is so strange and weird, um, it's difficult to say if somebody is their real life, or or it's just a show. It's all mixed up because for example, James Franco, it's a type of art that he's creating. It's a type of art because everything is so mixed up that you don't know if it's real, if it's acting. He cannot act normal anymore because he acts as an actor, right? That's became his part of him. He's acting James Franco, and so he's doing his thing. Whatever the incoherent nonsense is he's trying to create, and everything, and you see what I'm trying to say. That's why everything's so freaking weird. But anyway, besides going too much into that sense, I'm just saying that it's time to consider how time works. Okay? You have a vote. And the bigger the balls you have, the bigger the bigger the balls you have, uh, the more your vote counts. Okay? I also have to say that somebody who's a gangster alchemist, which by the way, this is something that I come on inviting people, you, if you're listening, to use your will. Use your will. You understand? Like, you have to, don't whine about something not happening in this reality, or something corrupt happening. Use your will and say, okay, I see this is going on. That's what I want to see. And you start imagining that, right? If there is a resistance to it, because it's going to be resistance because somebody else perhaps doing, the dark magic or whatever, that resistance is going to show you that the energy is being blocked. You eat that energy away basically through the alchemical process, and you keep on shining that beautiful fire, that ecstatic fire, that real fire, with that image, and you imprint that image with that fire, with that true beautiful will. Now you cast it the vote that that reality is coming your way, and it will happen, right? It will happen if your vote and the energy that you contributed ended up, you know, together in a pile with other people who were envisioning the same thing, and it crossed the threshold when it became imminent for it to happen, and not these other corrupt wills. Very important. If you are an alchemist, you have responsibility to be a magician and the warrior and the lover, actually, too. Don't forget that. Because this is how the will gets right. The love making makes your will right. That's what makes you see the world as it should be. Without it, you have no fucking idea what is right or wrong. So, I'm calling everybody who's doing, alchemy, and sometimes they call it specific alchemy, right? Um, which is, it is a type of alchemy that you do to correct the will, right? It's like you can do the general. Again, everything I'm saying is through my direct experience. It's And I've noticed that, okay, there is this general alchemy that I need to do. Okay, fine. So there's something that I'm correcting generally, and that's great. But then sometimes it's like I want to have this in my life, and then if I imagine that, there's this alchemical challenge that arises again. And I'm like, oh, it's blocked. It's blocked. Right? Do I want it? Like, do I want it real bad? Then you keep on doing it. You keep on driving that will for that to be the case. Now, I have to say that, like, only recently this started to dawn on me, and sometimes, like, I was using this, and sometimes I was not. And I consider that dropping a ball. Because because, for example, desire was there, or desire is there, and the image that I'm having, I love that image, everything is great, but when I'm trying to imagine that, all sorts of blockages come along. And sometimes the blockages come along so big, so heavy that you're like, fuck, it's just not worth it, you know? The reality is it probably is worth it. The obstacle is the way. But sometimes I just said, like, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't worth it because you only have you only have limited time and energy. And what are you going to use this for? What kind of reality are you going to create? Are you going to try to break something that is like very difficult to break, and perhaps it's not really give you that much in return? Are you going to use up all your energy for that image to be real? Right? Because some things are easy, some things are just imagine and it's easy and there's no block. But some things you imagine, especially the ones that you really like, there's block there. Okay? But the message I'm sending here is that will, it is a type of resistance training. It is a type of resisting something, right? You imposing your will. You must win against somebody else's will. This is what the fighting means, right? When you fight in martial arts, okay, who's going to win? Whose will is going to dominate, right? So you're willing that into existence. And so by definition, will is always resisted. So this is something that Krishnamurti was not talking about. And I think this is partially why his teachings were great, for this particular purpose, but did not bring it home. And he was not himself, engaged into imagination and imposing the vision and the reality, through his merit. I don't know why not. He was not even going to the world of imagination. I think that was his mistake, honestly. I think that he could have used a lot more of the magic and reimagined the world, because he did have a lot of capacity for intelligence. He could have used that intelligence, used the will to create a different. And I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying that I did not see him talk about this or use it in a bigger scale. Maybe he was on a smaller scale, but he was just saying that they're not listening to me. When I talk to politicians, they're not listening to me. Where the reality is that they don't have to listen to you. You can use will to change their minds. I mean, otherwise, what kind of alchemist you are, and why? What are you using your philosopher's stone for? The will is important, and that brings me to this idea of free will. You see, well, I don't want to do something against somebody else's will. Like, I don't want to do that. That might be something inside of you saying that. Doesn't work like that. It's a lie. If you have sufficient intelligence and the desire is born for that to be the case, then you have to drive it home through will, and it's going to be against other type of corrupt will. Right? You see? That's how you drive it home. And it is a type of alchemy and magic too. It's quite different, but from theurgy, but thaumaturgy is it. Thaumaturgy is it. It is the use of willpower against all the other. And the more energy you contribute to it, the more aligned that will is. You see, because you could be a lot of incoherent will to be used for this, and it is not going to happen. What's going to happen is the will that is the most coherent, most beautiful fire energy. It feels ecstatic. Right? When you get to the point of ecstasy with the image in your mind, you got this. But first, you may get to the image, and there's all sorts of blockages that are there. Alchemizing that, zeroing them out, that could take you along. So it's work, right? You're working on that particular vision. So it's work. Bringing to the zero, only then something of coherence starts arising, some ecstatic feeling starts arising. Boom. Now you have that ecstatic state with that image. Now, Excalibur, by the way, this is what it means. I am separating the two, right? First, you work on the intelligence. When you have the intelligence, then you work on the will. Because you got to take the corrupt energy, bring it back to the Mount Doom, recast it into the correct energy, and then shine under the same image. Okay? This is why alchemy, theurgy, and thaumaturgy, and physiurgy, they all work together. And that energy of will is a distinct ecstatic feeling, and it is quite fiery feeling. It is different from bliss, but out of that bliss, that which is light, fire, which is ecstasy, stems. See, we have figured a lot of things out today. It's a good day. Okay? Because people may also try to use dark passion, but it's clumsy, it's cheating. People don't pay their dues because they're not alchemizing, because that's the hard job. You see, that's the hard part. Because you have to keep your attention on something that is disgusting, vile, and uncomfortable, and love it. And you got to keep the attention there long enough until it breaks through. That is the contribution of your energy in the most effective way. You're paying your dues to earn that thing, but you gotta will it into existence. You have to complete it. You can't just sit in bliss and do nothing. Now that you're sitting in bliss, what kind of images you're trying to create in your life? Imagine that, and drive that ecstatic feeling to that image. Imbue it with that image. And that will contribute the most energy for it to be so. Okay? Now, coming to the question whether it's definitely going to happen or not, that's a question for the inquiry. But I know that if you've seen that image and you felt that ecstatic feeling, that flashed that image with that ecstatic feeling, you have definitely voted upon this reality to come into existence. You see what I'm trying to say? Now, whether it's going to happen for sure or not, that's a good question, and that's just a different field of inquiry. That is, for example, I would love to see, okay, I've contributed this much energy, it is great, but then if I could just get a feedback and say, okay, that is not enough, I have to contribute more. And then you contribute more. And you keep on contributing until it reaches that point where, you would say, okay, this is it. This is now definitely going to happen. You don't have to put more. This is already done. So that already done state is what I'm fascinated about. Because you would have had to put so much energy there that it is clearly superseding all the other possible energies taking over, right? Now, because if you haven't, then somebody else may say, because this is what they do, right? In astral, they say, okay, wait a second, this reality is going to happen. And if I'm some dark schmuck, you say like, no, this is not what I've imagined. Someone is fucking creating a different reality than I tried. So they can challenge your reality, that image. And if they're challenging that, then you're going to have to defend it. Right? It's a battle of will. Anyway, hope that we learned a lot today. And I really hope that you're going to start using more of the will in your life. Because that's what makes things happen. That's what wills things into existence. It's not sitting on your fucking ass and say, I'm, like listening to some fucking schmuck talking about the same thing over and over again. You gotta let go of your ego, man. No. His life is going on. There's a calibration that's going on. It's like you are in the process of life. There isn't something that you got to specialize upon and neglect the other. You got to go through all of them and give right type of attention or intention or will or whatever you have to do to bring your desires into existence. And if you have alchemized the energy, then that desire is going to be coherent and it's going to be not only make you happy, but also is going to contribute to the whole as well. That's the real success. And it doesn't mean that like it's going to contribute to and help everybody. No, it's going to be contributing and helping those people who are subscribing to this holistic way of life, and it's going to be punishing the people who are subscribing to the matrix way of life. You understand? You have to be okay with that. That is good because you are taking the energy from the evil or dysfunctional or disorderly. You're doing good when people who are ego driven are getting punished. This is fine. They're getting punished and hopefully they're going through their own breakdown and then hopefully they're going to come back into the holistics. But they may be the last ones to do it, but who gives a fuck? You just work on growing the holistic way of life. You have your success. The success was holistic, came from the intelligence. Boom, next one. And you keep on knocking out of the park like that. And when you get good at it, then nothing can stop you. Because a lot of people may be cheating and not doing that, not going through all of the steps and getting success, getting fame, but they didn't sacrifice the entire soul and they run on a dark passion. Right? If somebody is running on dark passion and they create their success this way, that's not fucking success. It's, this game allows to cheat, but no. Fuck that shit. And light passion will always overcome the dark passion. However, dark passion is quick. It doesn't have to wait for the alchemy to be completed and and to go through all of these phases and stuff like that, right? It's quick. You just do some abominable thing that gets you off, because you see what I'm trying to say, right? Subdue innocence in some way, and that's it. And now you have that energy, and you do a little fucking ritual, and you contributed for that to come into reality, right? Through dark passion. This reality permits this. But when the real niggas come and play this game, then none of your magic works. All of your toys are taken away, and you're going to be crying and being severely punished for cheating in this game. When I say you, I don't mean really you, but I mean I understand going that way and thinking that that is the right way. This is like all this broken sexuality through the psychedelic abuse. This is all this belonging to cults. Um, all of this broken, artificially created intelligence, all of it. And you may say, well, fuck this. Well, this planet is not really doing that freaking well when it comes to, you know, intelligence, because people seem to be understanding this is the only way to get success, genuine success. I mean, not genuine success, but like artificial success. But you don't want to know? Do you want to know my opinion? I think that depending the size of your stones, that is what determines the final outcome. So I don't think that you need many people. I mean that people may agree, and they may say that, well, no, you need at least that many people, um, in all these parts of the world, to be envisioning this type of world and contributing genuine energy to this type of outcome for that to be the case, right? I don't know, maybe, but I think that technically, the way I see everything working and the way I see the energy is working, if one person can hold that much energy, one person is enough. So what I'm saying here is that if one person given the capacity to hold much more of that energy stream may overtake the will of the entire world. You may say, well, the entire region, entire country, entire way of thinking, whatever. I think that one person can sway the entire world. I'm not saying that it's easy. I think that it's very difficult. It's somebody who would have to love living in fire. I do, by the way, you know. But I also see that to be really completely being in that fire is intense and insane. And so it's not easy. And honestly, right now, is that if you want to um, if you want to have a genuine success and not sort of like a localized one, right, which it has been done, but if you want to have like a global, because if you have localized success, that's temporary. So the only real success that, for example, may have for yourself, but it comes from the breaking through the patterns that are global, that is real. You see? When your personal success comes from breaking the incorrect or corrupt patterns that are global, that is real. It's not going to be temporary. It's not going to be that another wave of idiots comes along and breaks that shit. You see? Again, this video is more about inspiring you to use your will and be a fighter, because this idea that's perhaps been sold to you that, oh, what about other people's will, is bullshit. There's only the will that sets you free and only the will that imprisons you. There's just like that. There's the energy that is, can set you free, and the drive or the energy that can imprison you. There's only two types. There's also different permutations of each, but it's just like that. That's the truth. You understand? So this original free will, this idea that oh, you can do what the fuck you want, is a trap. It is not the free will. Is this the will that imprisons you? It does not set you free. You understand? But that's how people would understand. How that's how people would thought that that's what the freedom is. That's to do whatever the fuck you want. No, the true freedom is actually to do what is right. It's the will that sets you free. So you find out what is right, and the only way you can find out is through the intelligence, and you only get intelligence through the alchemy. And you found out what is right, and that's going to be the most passionate desire that you find within your soul. And then you're going to have to will this into existence against all other wills. You understand? So you're going to have to disrespect severely these corrupt wills, these crooked cocks, these pre cocksters, predictors, and whatever. No, guys, no. This is no circus. I know that a lot of this manifesting reality has been used more like for a circus. You know, if you show if somebody, if you read the Neville's God, for example, book, and you have sufficient intelligence and you're listening to what he's saying and you're kind of getting it right, you're traversing the territory, the map that he's giving you. Every time you're gonna read, you're gonna start learning more and more and say, oh, I see what it's like. He was talking about alchemy, he was talking about theurgy, he was talking about thaumaturgy, and he was talking about all of those different things, but you don't see it unless you're living it. Then you start seeing it. But what do people do? They just take this, create these little fucking cults, their little groups, and they say, well, the Neville said this, and so they take this fucking literally, and then they create a fucking program in the mind and drill that, and until it is so. And they just create a delusionary world that's not coming from the intelligence. They use the corrupt will. You understand? So anybody with the corrupt will is your enemy. You absolutely do have enemies. And your will must move against the enemies. But that primordial will, where it matters, is astral. It's your imagination. It's where all the work is done. And then physically, sure, you also need to have that drive, that passion, that correct way of doing things. But you won't need to use a lot of force, because you already set things in motion, in the thaumaturgy. So there, alchemy, theurgy, thaumaturgy, and physiurgy, or alchemy, magic, and might. Okay, so I'm trying to make it like, if you haven't, for example, like to make everything simple, you've got to derive first of all that ecstatic fire energy. And it's specific. Like if you derive it about specific image, then you go through the specific alchemy, you derive that specific fire energy, and then you imprint on that specific image. That's when it's going to be done. And you see what I'm trying to say, which is very it may start very uncomfortable and like, oh, but when you go through it, it becomes more and more ecstatic, and that image becomes more and more real. I know what I'm saying here is true, and it works, and that's how reality works. I have no doubt about this. But what Neville was teaching, back then, there wasn't that much of opposition. There wasn't that energy so fucking thick with bullshit, and so it wasn't that difficult to create your will that comes from holistic approach. Now there's so much bullshit will that is used from the dark way, right? Because you see this like in a culture, What do most people are doing? How do they make money? You know, and directly you can feel it. I can feel it when something is evil going on in the world. I can feel it because I'm always taking the lowest rung as much as I can and learning. And so you can say, well, Neville Goddard was already explaining to you, like, what is there to learn? This is different fucking ball game. This is such a different ball game that we don't live in the same time as when he was living. Understand? This is a different ball game. The intensities are way different. It doesn't work so easily as he describes because it may be brutal experience for you to just create one particular event in your life because it's so opposed by the corrupt will. In the essence, he was right, but in practice, to do what he was talking about back then, now it's freaking it's work. And he also saying that, like, well, as long as you just feel it as a naturalness, right? Like, basically, where that image becomes natural to you, which is means zeroing it out, right? Where there's no blockage and no opposition to that, then that is done. It's when I that's just halfway. In my experience, that is just halfway. In this reality, that is just halfway. Because back then there might not be have that much darkness to oppose this, but now you have to go into that imprinting of that image with that passionate feeling, that ecstatic feeling, that coherent fire. Then that is what makes it done. I assume that if you are imagining something that has no opposition, you probably don't need to do that. You probably just need to zero it out, and it's probably going to happen because there's no opposition. But if there's a lot of opposition, you're gonna have to use the sword. You're gonna have to go into the fire. Okay? That's why to live life right now holistically and will everything into existence as supposed to be is it's basically living in the fire. It's basically living in the fire. So it's not like that when people are talking about. It's like somebody has to do the work. Just babbling about it does not work. Just saying this is so does not work. And unfortunately, if the framework of the will is corrupt, then all the subsequent wills are going to be corrupt as well. That's very unfortunate because somebody may be just like doing something, and I'm just like doing my science over here and there, and or I'm doing my art, but then it's being used, corrupted, misrepresented, and misused, and then so now you just became kind of a tool for some evil, nefarious way. And this is what happens with the soldiers, the scientists, engineers that may be financed, which is the energy of will, by some corrupt government. Right? That's a disaster. That's why it's so important to make sure that there's an intelligence within the governing structure. Only then submit to that type of authority. Otherwise, you refuse to do any of the work unless there's an intelligence governing it. And this needs to be, of course, looked at. But how many people are doing this? How many people are looking? What's how their work is going to be used? As long as they get the money, right? But that's not a good approach. Anyway, I'm digressing. So again, the will, the energy of will. Don't be afraid going against the grain. Don't be afraid fighting for the vision that you have in your mind, for your life, for people life around you. Don't be afraid, because you're gonna have to put things in order, meaning that some people are gonna have to be punished, some people are gonna have to be jailed, some people are gonna have to be the resources taken from. There's gonna be a lot of people, like these ego tantrums, throwing tantrums and crying. This is good. This is good news. If other people who are belonging more to the holistics are thriving, and they do have intelligence, and they do things right, they're supposed to be rewarded. They're supposed to have that will on their side. So it's okay to let all of these assholes and douchebags to cry and have their lives, quote unquote, ruined. You see, you have to be okay with that. In a big scheme of things, you're doing them a favor. Understand? You're doing them a favor, because they may still have to have a chance to get their life back in order. Because if no one's correcting that, they will sabotage, and they will guarantee to die. You understand? Because this is how it works. You can go too dark, you develop either cancer, or somebody kills you, or you see what I'm trying to say. That is guaranteed to happen. So if you come in and correcting that will, and they just gonna ending up locked up and losing all their money or their influence, and having an opportunity to reflect upon themselves and to realize, oh fuck, my will was just a stubbornness, and I've never questioned whether it's right or wrong. Now I have opportunity to do this, so perhaps there might be some breakdown there, and some soul may come alive, some consciousness come alive, so you're doing it a favor. You're doing them a favor. You have to have this attitude. This is not kumbaya attitude, right? This is a warrior attitude, and this is what it takes. A magician is a warrior, because it's a battle of the wills of the mind. What I'm saying, guys, is real. It's not bullshit. It's not CIA psyops and all this nonsense what people are talking just to distract you from. This is what works. You understand? This is what determines the reality. This is how you predict the reality. This is the true philosopher's stone. This is the true value. This is the true gold. The one that embodies the seed, the germ, the flower, and the fruit of life runs this bitch. Okay? For realsies. Bow. Alright, guys. I gotta go eat. It was a good video, though. Peace. I'll see you next one.